one of the biggest questions that we're dealing with right now is the question of what is strong consistency, and do you need strong consistency in your database? So the biggest problem that we're dealing with is there's differing levels or differing views of strong consistency, and a lot of people feel like strong consistency is just a write before read. I feel like it's really more than just a write before read. It's about compare and swap. It's about being able to read a value, update it, and then write it back out. So I think this is a really big challenge for our industry today, is dealing with these strong consistencies in the database. And that was what a lot of my talk was about, is how we push the consistency back down to the database where it belongs and not in the application tier. Well, I think scaling is, a lot of people talk about scaling from the application layer. I think scaling is actually a more interesting problem when you talk about teams and how you scale your teams. As people get into microservices architectures, how do you scale your teams to deal with this large growth of microservices, and how do you split your teams up between microservices? So I think scaling is actually more of a human problem oftentimes than it is a technical problem, and having your teams coordinate between each other to be able to scale the organization and effectively coordinate the services that they're building. I think one of the biggest challenges we've been dealing with is we've been building a production application. One of the things, we built this, a fairly solid architecture, a really amazing application. What we didn't build into it was a good monitoring and metric system, and so we had no visibility and observability into that system. And so what we found is that although the system was well built and designed, we had no insight into why things failed. And so we fundamentally lacked the observability of what was going on inside of our application. I think this is a fundamental problem with microservices in general, is how do you gain observability into a large graph of microservices, and what are the communication paths, and what services are talking to which ones, and how do I gain that insight? And that's why one of the things we're really focusing on is Istio, because Istio brings that observability into your application, into your microservices, and layers basically provides a layer of observability across your microservices, so I can see communication patterns and troubleshoot and find problems. Functional programming has been around for, it's now, I think we're finally reaching the point where it's becoming mainstream. For a long time, the problem with functional programming is you couldn't find people who wanted to do functional programming. Everyone that thought that it was kind of like an outlier, and it wasn't really a useful thing. With the adoption by, besides just Scala, in languages like Java, people are starting to realize that functional is a core paradigm that developers need to learn and use. And that's really kind of helped the broader adoption of functional programming. And the powerful thing with that is that now that you have a much broader ecosystem of developers who know functional programming, you can have a large team of functional programmers, and you see that when everyone's on the same page and everyone understands functional programming, that they actually can elevate their experience and be more productive as a team. So I think that's been a very powerful change in the industry, is the broader adoption of functional programming, just beyond just like some core languages like Scala, but across the board. And so I think that's really been useful. So what we've seen is we now have very large teams doing functional programming. They're very effective and very at solving problems because they have these more powerful tools of functional programming. Well, there's lots of exciting things that happen. Well, I love Scale by the Bay because it brings such a broad perspective, a broad number of speakers to talk about such a broad number of subjects. So it's not, I really like that they've gone beyond Scala to really scale. And there's a lot of interesting talks coming up. One of the ones I'm really looking forward to is the Legend of Twitter's panel, talking about storage, and hearing about the history of Twitter and a lot of the challenges they faced. It's really an amazing lineup of speakers that they have coming here, and it's going to be an exciting conference.